Inravio.com.
Oh, sorry, guys. Let's start that over. So, welcome to the 505 on Racing Show. Atlanta was this weekend for the top three series. We'll talk about that a little later on. Some other stuff's going on as well. I wanted to talk about Atlanta, actually. I want to go right to it because there were only 39 cars that started the event that showed up, attempted to qualify. They're starting a field of 40. You wonder where they're coming. There were a lot of teams, or 4 teams, that didn't make it in Daytona, that went home. 44 showed up. And understand that for years, NASCAR has started 43 teams. In fact, since 1998, NASCAR has started 43 teams in a race. Prior to 1998, the field was determined by the size of the racetrack. So the bigger the track, the more cars that started. But in 1998, they changed that to 43. And there have only been a couple of times where the field dipped below 43 since 1998. Now, one of them was back in 2001 after the 9/11 attacks. And there was another situation where the race was rescheduled for later on in the year, and one of the teams that qualified for the original event was no longer in business. So there was only 42 in that. But under the new charter system that came into play this year, 40 teams will start, 36 with guaranteed spots, and then the balance of the field will be filled by teams that are not part of the charter system. And, I'm not sure why NASCAR went to that charter system. I know why the teams wanted more of a say, and it was kind of like a trade-off. But think about, when the teams that are showing up. Now, when you look at that, the teams that show up, let's say you're one of the 36 teams, you're in that charter group. You're in the show. Do you want to start 36? Absolutely not. But you're in the show. So what are you doing in practice? Think about this now. As a race driver, as a car owner, on your side of the fence, think about this. You're in the show. You're there with your primary car, your best car. Are you going to take those chances that you might take where, you're not guaranteed in the show unless you're up in the points and driver points or owner points? So I'm not sure how this charter thing is going to pan out for 2016. But what I'm happy to see is NASCAR realizes something's not right, we have to fix it. And the teams went to NASCAR, and there's a lot of stuff going on with this charter system. But there were only 39 cars. So there were 3 teams that showed up that once they saw there were only 39 cars and they knew they were in. But, you look back and you're like, years ago, years before 1998, the field size was determined by the the size of the track. And I can remember a Daytona race, looking at the starting lineup, or actually looking at the finish in an old NASCAR book. There were 60 drivers that were in that race. And it was also back in that day so that you didn't get a DNF, or you didn't be scored as not completing on the laps. They would let those teams drive all night long if that's what it took to get their 200 laps in, or 150 laps, or 500 laps in. But then NASCAR realized we can't do that. The race ends, that's how it has to go. But when you think about it, when you think about it, it is, you got to keep changing, and you got to keep going, and you got to, you could always go back to the way it was, but this is a major change going with this charter system. It's a big change, and now it's race 2, and it didn't look good. But what can you blame? You can't blame the track operators. You can't blame NASCAR. Hey, they opened the gates, come on in and come racing. What's going on? Some of these low-budget teams, they have to pick and choose the race they're going to go to, and they're going to look at the payoff sheets and say, it's going to cost us XYZ dollars to go to this event, and we're going to only make ABC dollars. You know what? Let's save our resources for another event. And I see that we're going to see more of that throughout the year. Atlanta is not that far. It's not that I could see if this was Phoenix or Sonoma, less teams headed out there. But, Atlanta's not that far from the hotbed of racing in North Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out as the season goes forward. It should be really interesting. But, it's like having, picking the field when you have a rain out, when you can't, qualify. Just line them up in points. I mean, is that what's next? That we're going to line up the cars, all right, based on points, the old, like a handicapping system? I don't know. I think this needs to be tweaked a little bit, and I think NASCAR needs to take a look at, hey, the teams that normally come and have been coming, what's the deal? What's going on? And I think NASCAR needs to come forward and say that, and send out a statement, put it on NASCAR.com, something, because that's not a good feeling when you can't fill a field in the top series. And maybe NASCAR had some foresight into that, because they think about it. If they was starting 43, there'd have been 4 cars short. But I'm sure NASCAR has it all figured out, and they're going to do what they can to make this better. And it's a work in progress. It's continuously a work in progress, no matter what business you're in, whether you're in the racing business or you sell a product in the street. It's always a work in progress, and you're always trying to make better what you had before, and you have to try different things, and you cannot become complacent and do this, well, that's how we always did it, You can't do that, the old paradigms. We do it this way because we always did, and you need to just go forward. So, anyway, I see Kevin Basic, Long Island E for Speed is viewing from home today, so a lot of questions. But that's okay. And I don't know. Jay Slice, but Jay Slice feels you're going to see less and less than 40 cars by the end of the year. And I'm not thinking that he's wrong. Especially when you get down to the chase, let's say, and you're the 39th, 41st guy. But does it pay to even go at that point? I'm not saying that's what I want to see. I don't want to see that. And I think that's one of the downsides of the chase is guys who don't have a chance might not show up. Whereas, even though a guy might have clinched it with 3 races to go, people were still racing for the top 10, the top 20 where the money's paid out, even the top 25. Because think about it, a guy comes in 30th in points last year. What's his goal? To be better. So, I could be 25th in points, maybe. Hey, I'd like to be the top 20. But that doesn't always work that way. It does not always work that way. And speaking of NASCAR, Frank Earnhardt, no relation that they feel to the Earnhardt family. He's not known to be a member of the extended Earnhardt family. Frank Earnhardt has been reinstated by NASCAR after a suspension for substance abuse. In May of 2013, Frank was found to have violated the substance abuse rule, and he was with an undisclosed team back then. And they're not saying what team he was with, but it was an Xfinity team. But he was also served as crew chief for Morgan Shepherd in an Xfinity Series race back in 2011. So he violated the substance abuse policy. Now, that's big. NASCAR is continuously checking that. Continuously. They don't want to have that. And substance abuse has become a big thing. It used to be a back alley thing, behind closed doors things. It's out in the forefront. And you can't have a team member, a competitor, or anybody involved with our sport having a substance abuse problem, it clouds their judgment. And I've been around racetracks for a long, long time, and you know, it's kind of sad, some of the stuff you see that goes on in some of these places, and some of the people who are in positions that run weekly tracks or have a say in weekly tracks or even just work at a weekly track, and you know what they do and what they don't do, and it's kind of scary. And I really think the substance abuse program should trickle down to the weekly series as well. And I would love to see NASCAR walk into a weekly track and say, you, and you, here's the bottle, let's go. And I think there'd be some major changes at some of the weekly tracks. And I'm not, fingering anybody or pointing blame anywhere, but it's gotten out of control. Substance abuse has gotten out of control, and NASCAR is doing its part. Frank Earnhardt was caught, did his time, he went to a program. NASCAR feels now he's ready to come back into the sport and do what he does. Again, and this isn't the first crew member in NASCAR that's had this smack on the wrist. Some heed the warning, some go through the program, make it better. Some continue, they're gonna fight to the end of time that they're innocent and it was a prescription pill that came up wrong, or, like Jeremy Mayfield, a talented individual, threw it all away. And I think, when you're gonna fight NASCAR like that and fight them and say, oh, you're picking on me, I didn't do that, it was a mistake, and you wanna stick to that story, and then you have a situation that the police are involved, that's when you know you're not ready. You're not ready. What do they say? The first step is admitting it. And I wish Mr. Mayfield went well in his endeavors, and I hope he gets the help that he needs. But when I see stuff like this, that a crew member was found to violate the substance abuse, a rule in the Brew Book, and he went out and sought out the help that was necessary and all the programs that were necessary and put in place to help him. It's like not only at NASCAR, but any job, any big corporate job, you go and say, I have a situation, I have a problem, they will help you. And that's all I'm saying. And I'm glad that Frank Earnhardt got the help that he needed. And he's back. Hopefully he'll land with a team and do what he does best, and that's being a crew member on a race team. We're going to take a break, and we come back. We're going to talk about Stuart Haas's stuff going on with switching to Ford when we come back.
Hey, this is Chris West Jake, and if Inravio.com spots you at an event wearing this bracelet, they will give you $100.
This is Sarah Martin at Daytona International Speedway, and you're watching Inravio TV.
Village Music Shop of Mastic. 1-800-HEY-DUDE. Your full-service store with personalized attention, school band instrument rentals and sales, music instruction on all instruments for all styles and age groups, for guitars, drums, amplifiers, PA systems, and accessories. It's Village Music Shop, 1495 Montauk Highway in Mastic. Call 1-800-HEY-DUDE or go to villagemusicshop.com.
welcome back. Welcome back. So, Stewart-Haas Racing, it just seems like they're in the news all the time. But Stewart-Haas Racing will be switching to Ford in 2017. All four cars will go from the Chevrolet that they've used forever, it seems, to Ford power in NASCAR Sprint Cup Series racing. Stewart-Haas Racing had an alliance with Hendrick Motorsports, and Tony Stewart sat and discussed this way before this was even announced with Rick Hendrick and with Ford and the powers to be. And Tony Stewart had said he was surprised that it didn't leak out, that these negotiations have been going on for months, and he'd be going to a Ford. Rick Hendrick is not taking it personal. He understands business is business, and there's an opportunity here for Tony Stewart and Stewart-Haas Racing to move to Ford and get some Ford help. And that's what it's all about. You have to go sometimes where the money is, and I know there's loyalty and all of that kind of good stuff, and it's not always about the money, but you know what? When you're spending tens of millions of dollars to go racing, you have to do what's right for your organization, and I think that's what Tony Stewart and Stewart-Haas Racing is doing. And as Tony said, he mentioned it's time, and this is a quote, it's time we got out of the shadows and do our own thing. Now that says a lot. When Tony Stewart and Stewart-Haas Racing got together and they formed this team, you don't just start a team and not have help. Rick Hendrick was a big help to Tony Stewart and Stewart-Haas Racing. And so now the teams are established. He needs to do what's right for Stewart-Haas Racing. And, of his drivers, he's Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, I'm sorry, Kurt Busch, Danica Patrick, and Clint Boyer. They're going to have to make that adjustment. Now, is it a big adjustment going from one manufacturer to the other? I don't know. At that level, I'll bet you it is, and there's going to be a learning curve. But you think about back in the shop, all your GM, Chevy stuff, gone. It's useless. Your heads, your blocks, your rods, everything, it's all useless. And I happened to take a private tour of Jack Roush's shop years back, and I was in what they called the engine room, and there were engines lined up. It was like going to a department store and trying to pick out, clothes. There was just rows and rows of engines all stacked up. And what do you do with all that equipment? I mean, what do you do with all that stuff? Do you just throw it away? And what's that cost factor involved for the switch? And, how much is Ford kicking in and Stewart-Haas buying all of this stuff? That's an agreement or the deal was made behind closed doors, and we'll never know the real scoop on that. But this is big. It's like when Richard Petty ran Ford for a little while in the late 60s, everybody was like, wow. And then he went to, he was running his Hemis, and then they outlawed the Hemi, and then he sat out a year, went drag racing. But this is a big thing, and like I said earlier, Rick Hendrick is not taking this personal, and he wishes Tony Stewart luck, well with his Ford change. So, Jay Slice, man, you like to stir it up, man. You wonder if Stewart-Haas switch has anything to do with the Formula One team that they're starting. And I'll tell you what, maybe that was all part of the thing, the transition. Hey, look, Tony, why don't you switch your NASCAR stuff? And hey, business is business. Business is business. And speaking of business, I had a customer come up to me today and who was not into racing, but he asked me, he said, I don't understand the difference between NASCAR racing and IndyCar racing. And I kind of looked and I was like, all right, here's a guy, things we as racers take for granted, that's real simple. But here's a guy who's inquiring, and I'm going to try to make him a fan, And so basically I told him the NASCAR race car is a car that kind of resembles a street car, whereas the Indy cars really look like a torpedo with a wing and four wheels and tires. And he understood that because I put it on terms that he might understand. And he understood that. And he was like, so why would guys want to race cars that go 240 miles an hour with like no protection? Because in his head, there's just the bar over them. And I said, well, they're in there pretty serious. Because if you've ever watched a guy get into an Indy car, they got to kind of slither in and put their arms up and come down in. Whereas us stock car guys, we climb in, like we're playing on monkey bars, and that's a big difference. But Tony Stewart switching to Ford, that's big. That's big. And I'll tell you what, I'm thinking as Ford is starting to make this big influx again back into NASCAR, I think you're going to see a little bit more of that like it was years ago. Who knows? Who knows how that's going to work out? But maybe somebody could explain to me what V8 motor they run in the Camry, because I don't know if Toyota making a V8 motor. Just saying. And when I asked that question down in Concord once, I got strange looks. But anyway, it was like one of those things that it's on a need-to-know basis, and I didn't need to know. So, but it changes like that. It's, when Camry came in, a lot of people were up in arms over that. A Camry, that's not American. It's Ford, Chevy. Back in the day, Chrysler, Dodge, Plymouth. Remember on the side of Rich's Petty-Card it says Plymouth by Petty years ago. And now it's a whole different thing. And, we've talked about this many times. And about, back in the day and now, and how the cars are all cookie cutter, and the decals are what differentiate it from a Ford or a Chevy. And yeah, the templates are a little different, just a little different. But, when I was down in the R&D center a couple of years back, and they had the new car for that year, and I don't remember exactly what year it was. I think it was 2012 or 13. They had the new race car on one side of the R&D center in this big room, and they had the stock production car. And for the most part, the lines were the same, even with the trucks. I know a lot of people say there's no way. Yeah, the Campbell World Truck Series truck is lower than the production series truck on the street, but the lines are the same. The hoods are the same, the fenders, the doors, and the way it looks. And you line them up together. And they're there. But that's the problem with cars today. They all look the same. If you took the emblems off of production, street stock production cars, took the emblems off, you'd be hard-pressed to say, that's a Ford, that's a Chevy, that's a Camry, that's a Chrysler, that's a, whatever. You'd be hard-pressed to do that, okay? And when you look at that, and, when you look at that, it like years ago, there was identity. You knew the Wood Brothers Ford. You knew what that was. It was the old Torino. Or Petty's Belvedere back in the mid-'60s. You knew what it was. The cars looked different. And the reason they look all the same today, and I'm going to say this from a guy who's behind the scenes, it's just easier to tech them. It's just easier to tech them when the bodies are pretty much the same, especially when you're using templates. And when you're using those templates, how many templates can NASCAR bring to a racetrack? They allow this body style for this make and model, and that's it. Whereas like even with the modifieds, they called them modifieds because the teams, the car builders at the time, they took what they found in junkyards and modified it to fit their needs. And you go with the old coupes and the coaches that ran in the 50s and the 60s, then to the Pintos, the Vegas, the Gremlins that ran in the 70s. And then they moved on to the Troya cars and the Cavaliers and the cars of the 90s, the small cars. Now they pretty much all look the same, and some of the builders are a little, I don't know, try to be innovative. But what happens is you can't be innovative. You have to be a conformist. And if the rule says the rear window opening has to be 9 by 14, that's what it has to be. And if there is no window, how far back can you go if you don't run a B post? And that becomes at the discretion of the official in charge, and that becomes a big thing. And even the A post, and for those who don't know, the A post is the one by the windshield that comes down off the roof, and the B post is the one behind the door. And when you look at those, there's measurements for that. There are so many measurements on a modified, and I'm sure there's even more on a Sprint Cup Series or an Xfinity or a Camper or Truck Series truck. You know, it just made tech easier. And I know when I was doing tech, and you know, it was one tool for everything, you know, for every make and model. And you know, so I know when I first started doing it, I was like, wow, this is kind of, how could that be? You know, I can remember working in an Xfinity race, and you know, we put this thing on the wheels, and you took this other tool, and it was like a radius thing, and you know, for the wheel wells. Not every make and every manufacturer, the wheel is exactly the same, but for the purposes of this tech, it had to be. It just had to be. But I don't know. Yes, I'm having spelling lessons in the chat room tonight. That's all good. But anyway, that's where it is. Tony Stewart switching to Ford, the big nose. Tony Stewart was at Atlanta this weekend. Coaching his driver. It's good to see him walking around. He's on a treadmill. He's working on. I think this is going to be a long recovery. You know, when you injure L1, lumbar 1 in your spine, that's like right smack dab in the middle. And every twist, every turn, every movement, it's going to be uncomfortable. So Tony Stewart has to sit it out for a little while. And it's a shame because I like Tony Stewart as a competitor. I like the fact that he tells it like it is. And you know what? I don't want to say there's no filters, because he has filters, but he's not afraid to speak his mind, and he does it in a professional manner. And some people can't do that, and he's done that. I've had conversation with Tony Stewart over the years. I remember the first time I met Tony Stewart was at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. He was running a race with us. He was running with the modifieds, and because of Sprint Cup obligations, he couldn't make the drivers meeting, so I had to do a one-on-one with him. And you know, he was probably sitting like, who's this guy telling me? I know what I'm doing. But we had to go through it. I had to go down the checklist, you know, like they did at the drivers meeting, so that he could say later on, oh, I didn't know that. But he was respectful, and then when it was all over, my kids, my girls were there, and he actually had a conversation with my kids, and then Tony Stewart, the race car driver, became Tony Stewart, the human being, when he talked to my kids. And you know, that's what it's all about. You got to know when to put it on and when to take it off. So anyway, we're going to take a break. We come back. We got some Hall of Fame stuff to talk about for the class of 17 when we come back.
Hey, I'm Raul Panther.
And I'm Commander B. Hawkins.
And I'm Rich Willie. We're some of the proto men. If we see you without this bracelet, you get punched in the But if you have this bracelet from Inravio.com, you can win $100.
Put one of these on, or else.
For over 60 years, Hansen Carpet has put the customer first, providing only the finest quality products and service. And Hansen Carpet is so much more than just carpet. We also carry a wide selection of window blinds and shades, and our licensed and insured technicians can service any of your flooring or window covering needs. Browse our huge selection of laminate, carpet, linoleum, vinyl, and tile. Stop by our showroom today or visit The world of advertising has changed. Radio, TV, and newspaper revenues have declined drastically. Why? Because businesses have realized that advertising return on investment isn't what it used to be. So what can we do about it? Well, that's easy. Advertise online. Own a local restaurant, real estate agency, or even a national retail chain? Whatever your business, Inravio can get your message out there. And we can do it at a fraction of the cost. Call today and see the difference for yourself. This isn't TV. This isn't radio. This is Inravio.com.
Hey, during the commercial breaks, I kind of look through the chat room and see what's going on. And, some of these names, I don't know who these people are, but I know who Snooki is, and thank you. Anyway, there was some WJ talk in the chat room and the spell check and everything like that. It's kind of funny. I was cleaning out my desk just over the weekend, and I found what I wrote when I spoke at Walter's farewell, and I'll tell you what, he was on our show many times, and I'm happy to say our opening scene when we go through the opening before we start, he's in there. He's in that picture, so he'll be a part of this show for as long as I am. Let me tell you, he was like I said many times. He was my biggest fan and my biggest critic, and. Sometimes he couldn't even wait for the next day to call me. He'd have to call me on my way home, which, he shuts his phones off at 9 o'clock. So he made a special dispensation to talk to me sometimes. But anyway, let's see. NASCAR Hall of Fame ballot. They added some drivers, or people, I should say. They added Ricky Rudd, who had 23 Sprint Cup Series victories, and Ron Hornaday, who raced in just about every series there was in NASCAR, but he's best known for his 51 wins in the Camping World Truck Series. Also, engine builder Watto Wilson was added, and then TV announcer Ken Squire, who announced the first Daytona 500 live flag-to-flag coverage in 1979. They joined 15 other nominees who appeared on the ballot last year, plus 5 more this year. Again, 7-time NASCAR Mod Tour champion and 9-time overall champion, because he won 2 Busch North Series events, championships. Mike Stefanik, he'll be on the ballot for the 2nd time. And it'd be good to see if we can get a modified guy, in every year. We got Jerry Cook in, we have Richie Evans, and there's just so many guys over the years that just deserve to be in this Hall of Fame, and it's hard. I mean, when you're talking about a sport that started in 1948, and the Hall of Fame isn't that old. It's only been around a few years. When you look at that, how do you go back? How do you guys and gals even that started this sport, were the pioneers who made their living on the road. They packed it up and they weren't racing. And if something broke, they went to the nearest parts store, junkyard, whatever, and they did that. It's a whole different era. So how do you get some of these guys in? Well, the people who are on the voting board, they really, it's funny, and not that it's funny. I was in a racing organization, as everybody knows, SAFER, and we were sitting there talking about Hall of Fame candidates. The Ernie Mena Memorial Hall of Fame. Ernie Mena, who lost his life racing figure 8 cars at Leicester Speedway back, I believe it was in '82. But when you think about that, when you think about these old timers, it's hard to pick one, because there were guys that were in SAFER and they were like, I never heard of these people. How can I vote for someone I never heard of? I never saw that guy race. And I think that's what's happening now. Some of the old folks from years ago are being overlooked because nobody knows of them. And I think that what has to happen is if those family members or old friends or old crew members or old car owners, think that their person is deserving, they need to campaign for that. They need to say, hey, my driver was whomever, and he should be on that ballot too. And get with the people who have a say in this. Write them letters, email, and Facebook, and whatever you have to do, because there's some people that are being overlooked. And Jerry Cook, He made it in last year, long overdue. I know Jerry Cook on a personal level, and I remember saying to him one time, look at this man, a really nice Richie Evans got into the Hall of Fame. And he looked at me and he said, what about me? And, talk about foot and mouth. I felt, oh, yeah. The whole bunch of ways I could have went about that. Hell, you and Richie should be in. but I didn't when you look back. So, it's a prestigious thing to be recognized by your peers to get into a Hall of Fame, whether it's a National Hall of Fame like the NASCAR Hall of Fame, or here on Long Island, the Ernie Main Memorial Safer Hall of Fame. It's an honor that your peers put you in there, and that your name goes on a perpetual plaque, and you have your own plaque and all of that good stuff. So, it'll be interesting to see if we can get another modified guy in there, because modified racing was the first division in NASCAR in 1948 called modifieds. And they went to a showroom, the car showroom, and they took a car and they modified it to go racing within the rules. And eventually they became, late models and Grand National cars, and then modifieds kind of guys at local racetracks started putting these cars together. And man, like an old-time scorer. I was at Marty Himes one time, and there was a person who started scoring before I was born. And she said, back when I first started scoring, we didn't need to know the numbers. Everybody's car was distinctive and had a different look to it. And you couldn't tell them they were wrong. And yes, for those who don't know, that Kevin Basic, Long Island Need for Speed, he is in the Hall of Fame. Him not personally, but the Richie Evans video that they use in the Hall of Fame at the Richie Evans display was provided by Kevin Basic and Long Island Need for Speed. So his claim to fame. He has a little plaque for it too, and everything. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, and that's a good feeling. It really is. It really is. And speaking of modified racing, NASCAR recently announced Jimmy Walker will become the series director of the NASCAR Whelen Southern Modified Tour. Walker, who replaced Justin Ellis, has 13 years experience officiating from several tracks in the NASCAR Weekly All-American Series. And most recently, he was race director at the Langley Speedway in Hampton, Virginia. So I wish Jimmy Walker well. It's not easy being a series director, and not that I ever was one. I was a race director, worked side by side with the series director, but there's a fine line of what you can and cannot do as a series director. Because, you got to deal with NASCAR, your bosses. You got to deal with these track operators and promoters, owners and the drivers, and of course your group of officials. And you get pushed and tugged and pulled and pulled. And Ed Cox, I'll tell you what, the guy was the consummate Southern gentleman, one of the best race directors I ever worked with. And, he was good at that. He was real good at that. And I always wondered why he never gave somebody an answer right away. Because let me kick that around a little bit. And we'd go into the office and he'd get his phone out and he'd make a phone call. Not that he wasn't capable of making a decision without checking with somebody, but it's keeping the higher-ups informed of what's going on. Now, some guys aren't good with that stuff. It's not an easy thing. Even as a weekly racing field official at a weekly track somewhere, the race director, head official, chief steward, whatever you want to call them, because they're all called different things at different racetracks. There's a fine line between doing what's right on the racetrack and doing what's right by the track operator, promoter, or track owner. And I could tell you a thing or two when it comes to that, firsthand, where you want to make this decision based on the rule book and how it's been handled in the past, and you get a phone call or a message that tells you to do otherwise, and that's a tough thing. And it's one of those things, and you got to keep not only do you have to keep your boss, but your superior, whether it's your boss or the track operator, they need to let you know what parameters you have as well. and so that nobody gets embarrassed. And I think that's gotten better over the years. And I think part of that is because most of the weekly racing series racetracks don't have the car counts that they once had. Years ago when you had, 150, 200 cars pulling into your pit area in the weekly series, and somebody messed up, it was easy to say, all right, you take a few weeks off, until you learn how to do this, and that's it. Or you're done, go home, whatever. But when you only have like 70 or cars or 60 or in some cases even less, you can't do that. You can't do that because that hurts what's coming in the pits, and they're paying, and those people have friends and family in the grandstands who are paying as well. So it's hard to do that. You got to look at the percentages, and that's what it all is. So, but that's how it goes. But oh yeah, so I wish, like I said, Jimmy Walker, I wish him well. It's not an easy job. Justin Ellis did a great job before him. Moved on to other things. Jimmy Wilson had the Southern Modified Tour prior to coming to the Northern Tour, or the NASCAR Wheeler Modified Tour. And it's not an easy job, and everybody thinks, oh, it's real simple. It's not. So I wish him well. I wish him well. Anyway, so Atlanta. When we come back, we're going to talk about Atlanta and with the Xfinity, Camping World Truck Series, and the Cup Series, and also a little milestone for Jimmy Johnson that he achieved in Atlanta when we come back.
What's up, guys? We're Scano Fair, and we're here with Inravio. If they catch you at a show with one of these bracelets, you will win $100.
That's a lot of money.
So get a bracelet.
Do whatever it takes to get that. Hit them up online.
The world of advertising has changed. Radio, TV, and newspaper revenues have declined drastically. Why? Because businesses have realized that advertising return on investment isn't what it used to be. So what can we do about it? Well, that's easy. Advertise online. Own a local restaurant, real estate agency, or even a national retail chain? Whatever your business, Inravio can get your message out there, and we can do it at a fraction of the cost. Call today and see the difference for yourself. This isn't TV. This isn't radio. This is Inravio.com.
It's always been important to us to have music a part of our lives, part of our children's lives. At Village Music Shop, Bonnie and Chuck have not only made it possible for our kids to learn and understand and read music and enjoy playing a musical instrument, but they've also made it fun.
I really like coming here. I like coming to Village Music because everybody here is nice.
And they've inspired some creativity and imagination and taught them discipline. And along the way, they've gotten some self-confidence, really been like a part of our family.
Hey, I'm Raul Panther.
And I'm Commander B. Hawkins.
And I'm Rich Weller. We're some of the proto men. If we see you without this bracelet, you're punching the But if you have this bracelet from Inravio.com, you can win $100.
Put one of these on, or else.
For over 60 years, Hanson Carpet has put the customer first, providing only the finest quality products and service. And Hanson Carpet is so much more than just carpet. We also carry a wide selection of window blinds and shades, and our licensed and insured technicians can service any of your flooring or window covering needs. Browse our huge selection of laminate, carpet, linoleum, vinyl, and tile. Stop by our showroom today or visit HansonCarpet.com. No matter what your project, Hanson Carpet has got you covered.
And we're back. We are back. The chat room cracks me up. Anyway, the top three were in Atlanta this weekend. Atlanta, Georgia for the racing, the Xfinity. We'll go with the Camping World Truck Series results first. Let's see. The Camping World Truck Series, John Humpton Nemechek was the winner, followed by Cameron Haley. Timothy Peters was third. Daniel Hemrick was fourth. Grant Enfinger was fifth. and Ben Rhodes 6th, followed by John West Townley 7th, Parker Klingman 8th, Caleb Holmlin was 9th, and Spencer Gallagher rounding out the top 10. Matt Crafton, who had the pole, finished 30th, a disappointing 30th after being involved in a late race accident. So that's where the Camping World Truck Series results went. The next race will be April 2nd in Martinsville. Awesome place for the trucks. I think that's perfect size for them. A lot of beating and banging hardcore racing. I love that place. The Xfinity Series was also in Las Vegas. I was in Atlanta. They're in Las Vegas this week. Kyle Busch won from the pole, followed by Kyle Larson, Eric Jones 3rd. Paul Menard was 4th. Ty Dillon 5th. Brad Keselowski 6th. Daniel Suarez 7th. Justin Allgaier was 8th. Elliott Sadler 9th. And Jeb Burton rounding out the top 10. In the Cup, Jimmy Johnson wins the race under caution. It was his 76th win of his career, followed by Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 2nd. Kyle Busch 3rd from the pole. Kurt Busch 4th. Carl Edwards 5th. Kevin Harvick 6th. Martin Truex Jr. 7th, Chase Elliott 8th, Brad Keselowski 9th, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. rounding out the top 10. With Johnson's 76th win, it ties him with the late, great Dale Earnhardt Sr. in victories. That's big. That's big. So what I did is, to show you how big that might be, I did a little comparing, and it's not that I'm comparing them as individuals. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was one of the toughest competitors I ever saw race. I met him many, many, many years ago. He actually shook my hand. Because, he was one of those guys where I remember, where he came from. And I wish I would have gotten a picture with him. But the day he won the Daytona 500, I got a picture with his crew chief, Larry McReynolds. And I just wasn't thinking, imagine that. But anyway, doing this little side-by-side comparison, Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Jimmy Johnson tied for wins, 76 victories each. Well, Jimmy Johnson did that in 509 races, where it took Dale Earnhardt Sr. 671 races. However, Dale Earnhardt had 280 top fives compared to Jimmy Johnson's 208. Dale Earnhardt had 426 top tens compared to Jimmy Johnson's 315. Dale Earnhardt Sr. had 22 poles, but then again, Jimmy Johnson had 34. Laps led, that's big, that's real big. Dale Earnhardt led, ready for this? 25,653 laps in his career, whereas Jimmy Johnson led 17,779. Dale Earnhardt Sr., as we all know, has 7 titles to his name, and Jimmy Johnson has 6. The only other person with 7 is Richard Petty, who's tied with Dale Earnhardt Sr. And the years that it took each driver, or the seasons, like I said, to get to 76 wins, it took Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s 22 seasons to get 76 wins, and Jimmy Johnson did it in 15. Wow. So, with that being said, I don't know, it's tough to compare. Dale Earnhardt was a tough competitor. And back then, he raced everything and anything from his humble beginnings, running the weekly series and late models or wherever he can get a ride and hooking up with Childress. And man, you look back, it's hard to believe that it's been so long, 10 years since we lost Dale Earnhardt. And as somebody put in social media, that he will never forget those words that still echo in his head when NASCAR President Mike Helton got on the news and said, we lost Dale Earnhardt today. And I was at that event. And I had him on the scanner and listening and those last couple of laps, because I says, his car's a 1, 2, 3. Who's he going to block for? And you heard him, and he was like, man, just getting on the radio, telling his crew chief, you get with those guys, you tell them to pick a line. I can't block the whole place. And not that he was really blocking, but he was protecting his spot as well. And he was just trying to make it happen so his cars won. And then that last half a lap, there was nothing. There was no, he came out of turn 2 and there was silence. It was silence. I'll never forget that it was a deafening silence. It's a sound I'll never forget. And I knew right away that we lost Dale Earnhardt. And then And I didn't say anything. My kids were with me at that race, and my girls. And when we went out to eat afterwards, and the waitress told them, my daughter Erin was like, she just became a fan. That was her man, But anyway, Jimmy Johnson, man, the guy's good. You can't take it away from him. The guy is good. Anyway, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's one of those things in racing, I don't think you'll ever see a driver win 27 races in a season like Richard Petty did in 1967. They raced a heck of a lot more back then. The season was longer. They raced every week, and Riverside was the first event. Daytona wasn't. They went out west first and worked their way back to Daytona, and it was a lot different then because the dual races, whatever you want to call them now, the Thursday qualifier runs, they were points-paying races back in the day. You got points for those races, and there was so many cars trying to make the race back in those days that, you didn't make it, but you still got some points, and it's just one of and 22 figure eight, he was there too, and he had him on the scanner, and I have a 100-channel scanner, so I have every driver I listen to, plus I listen to the 3 NASCAR channels, 3, and I listen to MRN, so I can find out what's going on, but, it was just an odd day, and unfortunately, in my career as a fan, official driver, whatever you want to call it, I've witnessed, unfortunate stuff happen at racetracks, and I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things. It's part of something that we accept, moving forward, and it hits you, and it's just like any other loss, you hang on to the memories, and you really do. So, anyway, speaking of memories, April 4th, we will be celebrating our 250th episode here at Inravio.com of the 505 Racing Show from our humble beginnings. I think we've come a long way with that. So, if there's a show that you don't want to miss, you don't want to miss number 250. It's going to be a good one. We're putting together some guests right now. It's good. We're going to have some fun with that. And next week here live in the studio, we'll have Alan Peterson live in the studio, and his race team, Checker One Motorsports race team. They will be live in the studio. We'll be talking some legend car racing and his success in the legend cars, and where he looks to be in a modified in 2016. And his dad, Artie Peterson, raced here on Long Island and some other places as well. So it'll be really good. It'll be a good time, be a good show. So don't miss it next week. And I'll tell you, we're going to have a good time, and we're probably going to be in the other studio, which a lot of people don't believe that we have. But we do, with Roger Oxy, if you're listening. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for taking time in your busy schedule to come on and watch the show tonight. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy chatting with you guys and gals out there. It's always good. And wherever your endeavors are going to take you this week, please be safe. Please be careful. Tell somebody you love them. Give them a hug. God bless you all, and we'll see you all next Monday. Thank you.